What is up everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm moths, and today we're going to be doing a video guide on Arlan. Now I think Arlan's been getting pegged in this patch as a bit of a budget blade, even by myself, and it's difficult to want to find value in Arlan, mostly because when the game first released, he was definitely being flagged in the leaderboards as pretty low damage, and to be honest, I think destruction in general was a bit of a mixed bag treatment when the game first dropped because we had Saley and Jingyuan banners to prioritize, and Clara was the only 5-star destruction damage dealer we had, so Arlan kind of got swept under the rug. And to be honest, Arlan's a pretty clean unit. He has some interesting elements about him because he can technically SP battery, and he does the blade thing before Blade did it. He reduces his own HP to increase his damage, so he's pretty cool, and so I wanted to cover Arlan today. As I used to do when I used to make guides, I'll start with the kit including traces and eidolons, I'll move over into builds which will be Lightcons and relics, and then we'll finish with teams. I do have to say, if you like these videos, please feel free to like or comment or subscribe, I really appreciate it. And if you're doing that already, thanks, fist bump, cool, bye. Let's move on to the kit. So the main takeaway of Arlan is that he likes to consume his own HP to attack, and I think back when one copy of Natasha was our only safety net, this kind of scared a few people more than it should have. Now, Arlan is risky, he does like to hover down at 1 HP. Starting with his skill, Shackle Barrier, he consumes 15% of his max HP to deal damage. The health cost is in place of a skill point cost, so Arlan is incapable of using skill points, which a lot of people can like the sound of because it makes him very skill point efficient. However, he does require a lot of attention from a healer or a shielder / aggro redirector to stay sustained, and we'll talk about that later. The lightning damage sits at 240% at level 8, which is pretty decent for a 4-star, he's doing pretty well. And it's worth noting that the 15% max HP cost will stop at 1 HP, so he's not going to KO himself through using his skill. It's pretty good, you can just hover around at 1 HP. His ultimate, Frenzied Punishment, is a 110 energy cost. It deals 320% in damage, lightning damage, to a single target, and then adjacent enemies receive a 160% lightning damage of that shot. His talent is pretty cool because it increases his damage for every percent of HP he is below his max HP. I think it's up to like a maximum of like 79% at max level, and bear in mind that due to his skill, Arlan is always going to be under max HP, so it's just a free damage buff from using him. Finally, his technique, Swift Harvest, is a battle instigator technique and deals 8% of his attack to all enemies. In terms of priority for his kit leveling, I think everything should be leveled pretty much evenly. His skill obviously edging a bit more ahead of the ultimate, and then the ultimate and talent being the more kind of evened out level. But just due to the way that his damage works, I think you would kind of unfortunately have to have pretty large investment in Arlan and try and level everything out as much as you can just to really get the most out of him. Because like if you only level up his skill, then you're missing out on the AoE of his ultimate, or you're missing out on the raw damage percentage increase from his talent. So yeah, definitely worth just considering leveling everything as much as you can. On top of his kit, it's also worth covering traces. So his 3 traces, we'll start with Trace 1, Revival. It lets him restore 20% of his max health if he defeats an enemy while he has less than 30% of health. The idea being that if you do a big swing with a max talent, you're hovering really low HP, then you have this safety net there for the high risk, high payoff play that Arlan requires. His second trace, Endurance, gives him a damage over time debuff resistance of 50%. It sounds weirdly niche, but the idea is that you don't want him sitting around at 1 HP and then him getting a wind shear and then that taking him out through a shield. So that's kind of why that's there, and it's actually a pretty cool talent when you put it in perspective. And then finally, not talent trace, sorry. And then finally, his last trace, Repel. Upon entering battle, if Arlan's HP is less than or equal to 50%, he can nullify all damage received except from DOT until after he is attacked, which again, it's more of a safety net and comes into play later with his 4th Eidolon for things like MOC, where you're fighting multiple enemies and retaining your health. But it's a nice safety net to have on him, just to kind of nullify any start of the fight nukes, basically. Speaking of Eidolons, since he's a 4-star, you might have come across them, and luckily he does get a lot of value out of a few of his Eidolons. So very quickly, E1, when his HP is lower than or equal to 50% of max HP, it increases his skill damage by 10%. His E2, using his skill or ultimate, will remove 1 debuff from himself. Remember, he doesn't use a skill point to use his skill, so it's pretty cracked at first glance because you could take off a potential debilitating debuff. Just be, mindful that this wouldn't work on something like an immobilization debuff because he would be immobilized, so he couldn't use the skill anyway. E3 and E5 are the usual buffs to skill and attack, and then all and talent respectively. E4, when struck by a killing blow after entering the battle, instead of becoming knocked down, Arlan immediately restores his HP to 25% of his max HP. This effect is automatically removed after it is triggered once or after 2 turns have elapsed. His E4 is very useful in my opinion. With his E4 and his major traces combined, Arlan can actually withstand 3 hits to be taken down at the early stages of a fight. It gives him that level of safety of wanting to start the fight with Arlan with high momentum by keeping him at low HP, knowing that you're not just going to get like nuked straight away. And then finally his E6. When his HP drops to 50% or below, his ultimate will deal 20% more damage. The damage multiplier of damage taken by the target enemy now applies to 8 adjacent enemies as well. Just crazy. A really nice buff that makes his ultimate have a lot of value as well. So doing some overall thoughts on his kit, in thinking of Arlan, it's very easy to think of him in isolation and take the argument that he's skill point efficient, but it does come with a balancing argument. If you don't have a strong and low skill point cost healer or preservation character available, such as in the healing case an ultimate bot high speed Natasha, then Arlan is going to need babysitting a lot, given because he's destruction path, he's naturally going to draw in aggro more, and while it's easy to say, oh, he doesn't cost skill points, there's the argument that he's constantly reducing his own health, so he needs that kind of coverage. For example, with the preservation side of things, if you don't have like a chunky Gapard shield, then you are stuck choosing between someone like Fire MC or March 7th. March 7th, obviously very skill point hungry if she's wanting to try and give you some type of AoE shield in, and then with someone like Fire MC, you do just have to be careful that his shields are quite small, and so a big chunk of damage could soak through the whole shield and go to Arlan if he's staggering on very low HP, so it's very dangerous. Obviously his talent is a bit bait because ideally you think, oh, I can get all this max damage, but you have got to keep him at that lower HP, so just healing Arlan can basically reduce his overall damage. There's also a lot of argument to say, is he just a glorified hunt character because he doesn't do much AoE damage, and so he can be very tricky to factor in, as a main DPS. It's just never going to work for him because he doesn't do the number output of someone like a Seele. He just isn't capable of like Blade's level of damage, and that's fine. But yeah, I mean, I was looking at Pridwen, his DPS legal tables, he sits pretty low. And so people very quickly want to make the argument, well, he's not a main DPS, but I think he's fine as a sub DPS. He does pretty well. He only clocks in behind Sushang at about 15% on Pridwen's league tables, for example. So there's a lot of value in using a character like Arlan if you can slot him into the team well. It's just being mindful that, he is mostly single target damage. He is very dangerous to play, and so you have to kind of watch out for that. Finally, there's a throwaway comment that when using Arlan, there's a lot of value in reducing his HP before the fight tool, just to start off with some momentum. So the garbage consumable or avoidance space anchors / having them be set to low amount can instantly crank up his damage percent scalings at the start of a fight, which with all the safeguards he has in place can be a good position for him to be using him. Now, speaking of damage, let's talk about builds, shall we? So when talking about builds, we are going to want to do your basic DPS build. It's crit focus with high attacking speed with a matching element sphere. Make no mistake on overestimating the value of HP on him, as all of his skills and buffs, they both scale off of percentage of his max HP, not the number itself, and so he doesn't get the blade mechanics of having a very high HP stat. You do just want to double down on the damage with Arlan to get the most out of his kit. Starting with light cone options then, I'll start with a 3-star option to move up to 5-star options. For 3-star, Mutual Demise is a great light cone for him because it's a free 24% crit rate, increase at super imposition 5, making your build a lot more flexible just because it's free crit rate. For 4-stars, I think his best option is a Secret Vow without a doubt at the higher super imposition levels, because you can get up to an 80% damage increase very easily, just given the way that the light cone synergizes with his ability to reduce his own HP. But with that said, there is a lot of value in, depending on the super imposition of Moles, Welcome You, and Under the Blue Sky, that the attack percentages of those light cones stand up very well, because with Arlan, damage percent and attack percent are quite interesting to balance, because attack percent is a lot more easy to get some value out of Arlan because he already has a lot of high damage percent modifiers built into his kit as thanks to his talent. And so with his already damage percent stacks being pretty big, attack percent performs very good on him, which actually directs me to a very safe 5-star option that's free to play and can work well, and depending on high super imposition can very easily match up with something like a Secret Vow. Basically on the fall of an Aeon, again at max super imposition only, can perform a superimposed 1 version of a Secret Vow, making it a very strong free-to-play pickup if you don't want to summon for light cons. The attack stat percentage ability aligns with his own stats very nicely, but I would stress that he's not known as an exploiter of break effecting, so the second passive will be touch and go. On a S1 to S1 basis alone, something irreplaceable does fall behind in value compared to a Secret Vow, and so I'd only use something irreplaceable if for whatever reason you've pulled it and you don't have a Clara to put it on. Finally, there is the unreachable side. I mean, if you have a copy of this, then yeah, this light cone is just great on him. The DPS ratings are great because of the crit and damage increase built into the light cone, and the extra HP doesn't hurt him, given the way he likes to play. So if you do have this spare, then, I mean, absolutely throw it on him. Outside of light cones, we can speak about relics. I'm going to be using the typical build, so crit rate or crit damage on chest, speed feat over attack percentage if you can get it, lightning sphere, and an attack percent rope, because this is just what's worked best for me. And like I say, we're not overstating the value of HP here. As a damage dealer, there's so much value in a Band of Sizzling Thunder as his 4-piece set, because the 2-piece lightning damage buff is a universal damage increase for him on top of his damage percent modifiers, and then the 4-piece attack percentage boost will have a 100% uptime, so the set is just a really great set for Arlan personally. If you are struggling for pieces, then I would prioritize a 2-piece Band of Sizzling with a 2-piece Musketeer for the universal lightning and attack percent increase, given that Musketeer is readily available. I wouldn't personally swing for the new set, what's it called? Longevue Disciple. I think the 2-piece doesn't really benefit him too much, and you should be able to build around the crit rate requirements with your stats and planar ornaments for this to even be worth losing all that value that you would otherwise get in a 4-piece Sizzling Thunder. Speaking of crit rate and planar ornaments then, I think Rutilant Arena is going to be fantastic on Arlan. It's the new World 7 in Simulated Universe. It will increase the wearer's crit rate by 8%, and when the wearer's current crit rate reaches 70% or higher, the wearer's basic attack and skill damage increase by 20%. With a base 5% crit rate, a crit rate percent body piece, you're already sitting at 45.4% crit rate, so the 70% isn't even unrealistic to hit. Outside of that, you do have the historic recommendations of either Space Sealing Station or Inert Salsoto. Personally, I'd prioritize Space Sealing over Inert though, as Arlan's base 102 speed with a max level speed feat already satisfies the requirement for a free 24% attack boost that will very, very easily complement his damage percent modifiers. Finally, for teams, and I'm going to keep this very light as I don't want to drag the video out too long, and I've already covered healers and shielders earlier on when doing his kit overview. However, now I do want to stress that the skill point management is a very difficult one to balance, but once you know how to balance it, then it's very easy to play Arlan to his maximum efficiency, including skill point economy. At the end of the day, where Arlan excels is him sitting at low HP and performing as a sub DPS. For reasons stated earlier then, pairing him with someone like Gepard or Fire MC for safe, reliable and party-wide shielding is always going to be your priority, and both Fire MC and Gepard do have a way of applying their shield without consuming a skill point, so I always recommend trying to keep one of them around him, but I'll show you some breaks where you have, a very strong skill point efficient healer. On top of that, when thinking about Arlan as a sub DPS, you are going to want to factor in your main DPS to push your numbers up, and so that's going to be kind of the base of the build suggestions. So for a few good basic team comps, starting with a free-to-play version, we have a variation of Qingque, Arlan, Natasha and Fire MC, or substituting Qingque for Dan Heng. The idea with these being that Qingque can be very skill point efficient if you know how to play her optimally too, and Dan Heng, while he's a bit more skill point reliant, most people have him built, and the combo of Natasha and Fire MC should be enough to give Arlan sustain with some room for some basic attacks thrown in there. For a more gacha-oriented option, you can start to swap in some more expensive characters like Seele or Jingyuan as your main DPS, where Arlan can then pick off the more weaker targets and help to generate skill points where those main DPSs are a lot more skill point hungry. With gacha summons, your support options become a little bit more varied now, because you can go down the skill point draining route where you have a really strong healer like Luacha who has multiple emergency safeguards and non-skill point related heals built into his kit. This will let you introduce someone like a Silver Wolf or a Paler to help debuff and ramp up the damage potential, or in an alternative build following that kind of low skill point consumption balance to match the main DPSs. If you can get someone like Gepard with the right energy regen requirements, he can just ult bot off of his shield, and so there's also an argument to then slot in some more, Silver Wolf or Paler type of characters who can actually take away from economy drainage system. Other support options that do pair well in these type of team comps are also Bronya and Tingyun, Bronya being on the more skill point reliant side, where Tingyun can be on the more skill point generative side. And so as long as you can kind of balance Arlan's reliability on the sustain, either in your preservation or your abundance character, and again, they have to be very well built to keep him alive, then that's where you kind of get to open up your options a bit further. And that's kind of all I have for you for Arlan. He's a really great character. Is he the strongest with a ton of utility? Absolutely not. But he's a 4-star who has a pretty cool kit, and he's capable of bringing a lot of fun into the game because of his unique playstyle. It's a bit less unique with Blade now, but it's still, you know, he was the trendsetter. He's prevalent on a lot of banners, so he's very easy to pick up a copy or two of, and I think as the game develops and we start to see introduction of new tanks and healers in the very, 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 very near future, that could really shake up how we use characters, and if any of those characters, wink wink, have the ability to draw aggro to certain other characters, we could really see some different team comps where Arlan might be able to shine, especially with his skill point potentially neutral economy. Something, like and subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the video, I don't know, come back for the next one. Thanks and bye.